Well, good evening. This is the lecture for week 2 on learning theories. We're going to be dealing with three different learning theories tonight. We're going to look at andragogy, which is the theory of adult learning, constructivism, which is how we begin to create knowledge and build it, and then Bloom's taxonomy, which is about taking knowledge from a lower level, lower thinking skills up to a higher level thinking skills. And so we're going to start off with andragogy. Now, andragogy is, like I said, the theory of adult learning. It is different than pedagogy, which is the theory of children's learning or child learning. Andragogy was popularized by Malcolm Knowles in the 70s. And Knowles made 6 assumptions about adult learners that have been woven into the way that we approach how we construct learning experiences, classes, and so forth for adult learners in many different settings. It includes online settings as well as in-person and blended instruction too. So Knowles starts off with 6 assumptions. The first one is that adults need to know why they need to learn something before they're willing to undertake the process of learning that thing. An adult spends a large amount of energy and time trying to understand the value of their learning and whether it's going to benefit them by learning it, or there might be a consequence of not learning it. So adults want to know why they need to know what you're asking them to learn. They either want to be told or even better led to discover why certain knowledge is worth learning, why it's worth putting their time and effort into the study of that. The second principle of andragogy is the role of the learner's experience. The learner's experience is a valuable resource in the classroom. In other words, what the learner brings to the classroom before they even partake in the study that you're presenting to them. What is their background knowledge? What's the experience that they've had? And when we can tap into that, it creates a better learning experience for the participants. That's also part of the constructivism that we're going to talk about a little later on, is building on prior knowledge. The third principle of andragogy states that adults have a self-concept of being responsible for their own decision-making for their own lives. And andragogy asserts that adults need to be self-directed. So that because of this strong self-concept that they already have of they're responsible, if it's to be, it's up to me kind of thing, then they need to know that they can self-direct their learning. In other words, there may be some part of what you have to present in the class that you're doing that they don't really like, but 95% of it they do like. And so they'll spend their time on that 95% to ignoring the 5% that doesn't affect them at all. So again, they want to be responsible for their own self-learning and direct it the way that works best for them. The next principle is the readiness to learn. So andragogy assumes that adults are living their lives while they're learning, that we're always in a constant state of learning. And the context of life demands that adults prioritize different learning at different points in their life. So for instance, if you start a new job, and let's say you're managing a team, but you've never managed a team before, you might seek out some classes on effective management, developing effective management skills, so that you can actually begin to feel like you're, doing a good job there. Or, all of a sudden you found out that you're expecting a new baby, and so you might go take a parenting class or a birthing class, things like that, because you have a point in your life right then where that learning is very vital for what you're going through at that particular given point in your life. And so, again, they're looking for things that'll help them deal with the real life situations that they're facing right now. The next principle is the orientation to learning. And adults are problem oriented. In other words, when they have a problem, they seek out a solution for it. And so they're problem centered in their approach to learning. And Knowles emphasized the importance of this by contrasting it to things that are disconnected from life experiences, don't really get learned. That when we're doing something and it doesn't really apply to us at that particular point in our life, it doesn't have an impact, and it doesn't stick with us. And so if we have a problem we need to solve, we're going to take a class on that. For instance, maybe in our spiritual classes that we have, if you offer a class on how to become more abundant, and you have people who are going through financial challenges right now, you might get several people to sign up for the class because it meets a need that they're experiencing right now. It solves a problem that they have. And then the last assumption is that adult learners are intrinsically motivated. Generally, children learners are more extrinsically motivated. They want to please the adults in their lives, and they are also motivated by the little rewards that we give them. Gold stickers, and my kids used to love the smelly stickers when I was teaching elementary school. Ones you could scratch and sniff, they thought those were the best things going. And the praise from the instructor. Those are really good motivators for children, but they're not for adults. To a certain extent, we all like to be rewarded for our efforts or acknowledged for what we've done, but for the most part, it's intrinsically motivated. In other words, that we engage in learning to meet some need that we have within ourselves. And so those are often the things that will help us become more motivated to take a class, is because it's something that we want to do. I want to grow. I know when I started in my spiritual studies, I wanted to have a different experience in life. And so I was intrinsically motivated to have that happen. So I took the classes that allowed for that. So now, what does this mean as far as how we set up a class? And so there's certain things that are important that are different than what you might have experienced in the traditional K through 12 setting, or if you had any graduate or postgraduate courses that you took in college or so forth, or instructional classes in skills and things like that. It's a little different than what we would set up for children learners as opposed to adult learners. So, for instance, when I started a class, I generally wanted to know where my students were in the subject that I was going to teach, and so I would develop a pretest. So if I'm going to teach the kids a unit on addition of 3-digit numbers, I want to see how well they can do with that, and so I would give them a pretest on adding 3-digit numbers together, and see how they did as far as all of that worked. And then I would base my instruction on the results of those tests. When I teach a class for adult learners now, again, they're intrinsically motivated. They want to see how they can take something and solve a problem in their lives right now. And so the first thing I have them do is to look at their lives. Now, this isn't for me, but this is for the participant in the class. And so I have this circle graph, which I'll post that on the Moodle forum for you, that is divided into 8 life structures. So like, say one of them is finances, another one is health and well-being, relationships, family, my home environment, my spiritual development, and so forth. I can't remember exactly what they are right off the bat, but anyway, then I have the participants in the class. It's on a scale of 1 to 10, and I have a mark on this circle graph where they are in that area of their life. Like, for instance, maybe their relationships are going strong, and so they give themselves an 8 out of 10 on that. But their health has been a challenge, so maybe it's a 3 out of 10. And so I have a mark on this graph, and now this is just for their own knowledge to see where they're at. And then we do the 6 or 8 or 10-week class, whatever it's set up for, on the topics that I've presented. I've already designed my instruction based on the topics, not based on the student, as I would have when I was doing the learning for the children, because I needed to know what the kids already knew and where I needed to take them from there. This is the instruction. Let's see how we can apply what we're teaching to all these different areas of life. And then at the end of the class, I would give them the same chart again and have them do a post-evaluation on it and see if they noticed any growth. Like, for instance, maybe their health was at 3 out of 10 when we started the class, but they've had some breakthroughs in the class and now they feel like they're at a 6 out of 10. And so they see growth on there. Or maybe there's something that has gone down in their life. It might not have anything to do with the class, but it gives them a place to look and say, oh, while I was focused on this area of my life, I kind of neglected this area, and now it doesn't feel as good there. And so again, it's just for their own edification. Nothing about it is used so much to design my instruction as it would have been in the K-12 setting. So that's another aspect of andragogy that's important to remember. There are, it can be used to help us determine the methods that we use for instruction. So in pedagogy, the method of instruction is generally the teacher telling the student. And sometimes you have activities where the students are working together and things like that, but it's not a lot of student telling student or student telling teacher. But in andragogy, we do that. We have the instructor delivers information to the participants deliver information to each other, and they both deliver information back to the facilitator. So it's more of a cyclic way of having the instruction happen, because as people are in a class for adults, as people are talking about things that are happening in their lives, I might bring in something that will help them work through that area of their life in a different way. Just depending on what it is. Like for instance, maybe I've got some people that are having some, a lot of relationship issues, and it's about old wounds, old things that have happened. So I bring in some activities on forgiveness to help them work through some of the challenges they might be having in that area of their life. Because I've got this reciprocal relationship going between the participant and the facilitator, and participants, we're all learning from each other, and so we can adapt it that way. Now the classroom environment. In pedagogy, the classroom environment is generally formal and it's kind of competitive. And so in an andragogy, it's more of a collaborative environment. Because we've taken out a lot of the competitive nature of it, it's not like anybody's working for those gold stars or that A+ on the paper. It becomes a more collaborative environment where the learner's experiences are valued, and the hierarchy, who's better than who, is gone. Each person is respected and valued as an individual. And it's an environment that develops warmth and trust, which is why so many people love to take our classes, is because we set up this environment where they feel safe to share, and they develop a great sense of trust from the other participants in there, because everybody's willing to share that way. In pedagogy versus andragogy, as far as preparing your lessons, the lessons in pedagogy are generally done based on what the curriculum is, where the lessons in andragogy are more on an individual learner experience basis. And so we don't really have to do a lot of diagnosis or evaluation in andragogy as we do in pedagogy. And, what assessments we do are based on the participant's experience in the class rather than some grade they've achieved or product they've created in there. And so, so when we go to design things, it's designed a little differently. Again, in andragogy, it's more problem-centered. Like here's a thing that people are experiencing, and here's a way that we can solve that. Where in pedagogy, it's more content-based. And so the things are a little bit different there. And like I said, there's not a lot of evaluation that happens in andragogy. More it's self-evaluation than it is evaluation of me evaluating the student's progress on something. Now, that being said, one of the things that I find very, very helpful for me is to have the students evaluate the class at the end. So I always have a evaluation sheet, and I generally give it to them the night before the last night of class, so that they can take it home and bring it back to me on the last class. Because I don't know about you guys, but when you get into a last class, you're done. It's the last 15 minutes of the last night of class, and you just want to be done and gone. you don't want to spend time doing an evaluation. And so I find if I give it to people early, then I actually get some good feedback on it. And so, you know, the big things that we want to remember about andragogy is that adults need to be involved in the planning and evaluation of their instruction, because it's important for them to make sure that it's relevant. And so, you know, that doesn't mean that you have to have them involved in how you set up the curriculum, but have them have some input on how they're going to apply that particular curriculum, that particular topic, to areas of their lives. It has to be relevant. They have adults are most interested in learning subjects that have immediate relevance and impact to their lives or their jobs or their families or anything like that. And again, it should be problem-centered as opposed to content-centered. You know, here's an area that people are finding challenging, and here's a way that we can work through that. You know, it's really important that a lot of our learning in andragogy is self-directed, because it helps. The three goals of self-directed learning are to develop the learner's capacity to be self-directed, to find out those areas in their lives where they want to grow, and then find the ways to grow it. And it's about fostering transformational learning. That's what we do here. You know, all of Centers for Spiritual Living and this whole idea of consciousness studies is about transformational. Transforming our lives from what they have been to what is possible for us to be. And it's a lot of it has to do with becoming freer in our lives, and freer to help us take social action in other areas of our lives, you know, things that are happening. Once we, you know, I say this a lot, is once I've known something, I can't unknow it. And so once I've seen how I can change my life and how this kind of thing can be used to help other people, I can't unknow that, and I can't go back to the way that it was before. And so andragogy is really, really powerful as far as helping us transform the lives of our learners, or having the learners themselves transform their own lives. And so that's one of the key reasons that I talk about this, because so often all we can remember from school is what we did in K through 12, or you know, maybe the lectures from college and things like that. It's hard to remember all of the different things in there, and it's just those standard things that were repeated over and over again each year. They kind of stick with us, and so it's important to know that there is a different way of instructing. I often find that new people that are beginning to teach classes teach the way they remember being taught. And so that's not necessarily the most effective way of learning something. So that's andragogy in a nutshell. There's a little more description. You have a handout that I've posted, so it has a little bit more detailed description of the 6 principles of andragogy there. And you have a video to do in your discussion forum that is on andragogy that'll tell you a little bit about that. So they're all short videos for you to watch, but I have 3 of them on there. Okay, so the second learning theory that we're going to talk about is called constructivism. And constructivism is about allowing people to actively construct or make their own knowledge by using their previous knowledge as a foundation for it, using what they already know to help them get a better understanding of what they're going to learn. So we build on previous knowledge as a foundation and then expand that out into new things that they need to know. And so constructivism has several key points. Knowledge is constructed. It's moved from the baseline that they have, and then we add to that knowledge as we're going up. People learn to learn as they are learning. So in other words, not only are we constructing knowledge, but we're constructing the ability to learn things in a different way. And learning is an active process in constructivism. It's not passive. It's not the teacher lecturing and the student receiving the information. There's an interchange of ideas that is going on, and it becomes very social. The learning in constructivism is contextual. In other words, it's based on a specific thing, just like we talked about with andragogy. It's generally problem-oriented. people are looking for a solution to a particular problem that they're experiencing in their life right now. And so they begin their learning with what they know and then build on it as they're going. In constructivism, the knowledge becomes personal. It's not some esoteric thought out there that, oh, maybe I'll be able to regurgitate it to somebody if I needed to, but otherwise, I don't really need to know this stuff. So it's about making the knowledge personal. And the key factor in this is the motivation to learn. And so again, we were looking for it to be relevant and personal and timely for them. In other words, they want to be highly motivated to learn this in constructivism. And so so as we're going through this knowledge, again, in this principle, knowledge is constructed upon other knowledge. We have to construct a meaning or systems of meaning to what we're learning, because it's not just learning the principles, it's not just learning the dates, it's about learning to help us learn more and help us synthesize that stuff in the future. And again, there's a need for it to be social. We have to be connected to each other, to our peers, to our families, and so forth, to make this more beneficial for us. So there are several different types of constructivism. One is cognitive. That's where it's focused on the ideas that should be learned, relating to the learner's stage of cognitive development. It's also, again, about that connecting information with what they already know and enabling them to modify their existing knowledge to bring in this new information. And then another form of constructivism is social. Social constructivism focuses on the collaborative nature of learning. So you guys are working on a group project. That's kind of social constructivism. Knowledge develops from how people interact with each other. They're able to create their own building blocks, and then they can show those building blocks to other people, and they learn to construct their knowledge from that too. So it's like this collaborative environment where people can experience the learning in a different way from either person, other people around them. There is an element of societal and peer influence involved in the learning there. And the third one is radical constructivism, which focuses on the idea that learners and knowledge, and the knowledge they construct, tells us nothing real. It only helps them function in their environment. The overall idea is that knowledge is invented, not discovered. And so this helps us with our interpreting the knowledge that we have to allow it to become more real in our lives. And so in the constructivist classroom, there are four key areas. And so the shared knowledge between the students and the teachers. There's also shared authority between the students and the teachers. The teacher acts as a guide or a facilitator. And learning groups consist of small numbers of students. And if we put too many people in a group, then it gets watered down, the learning gets watered down. Let me go back to that one. The teacher acts as a guide or facilitator. Since I started doing much more adult education classes than I did in the public school system, I've actually shifted the what I call the participants in the class. I think there's a implied hierarchy when we use teacher and student that isn't necessarily there when we talk about facilitator and participant. And so I actually don't use the words teacher and student in my manuals anymore even. I don't even write it in there, as I'm creating a manual for things. It's the facilitator, because that's what I feel like I'm doing in this adult learning in andragogy is I'm not teaching, I'm facilitating experiences where people can build their own knowledge, which is what constructivism is all about. And so I facilitate an experience for the participants in the class. And that makes all the difference in the world. It feels different inside of me when I talk about it. And I believe it feels different when I deliver it to the participants in the class too. I've eliminated that I'm the sage on the stage and I'm always right and what I say goes. There are very few classes where it has to be a certain way. The only one I can think of right off the hand right now that we teach at Centers for Spiritual Living is how to do treatment. And when we talk about how to do treatment, there's a structure to it. And in order to become a practitioner, you have to know that structure. You have to be able to demonstrate that you know that structure. You have to be able to orally give a treatment that follows the structure. And there are certain guidelines to it. And so that's about the only class that I ever teach where there's a set way on how to do things. And I give smiley faces and stars and oh wow, well done on the papers for the treatments when I'm grading them, evaluating those things. So I think it's that idea of a facilitator instead of a teacher and a participant instead of a student is a powerful idea for us to begin to create the classes that we want to have that are going to help us develop consciousness, because there is no right or wrong answer in consciousness studies. And so, I think this is a very important thing to get through to ourselves, not even to anybody else, but to ourselves, is that we are facilitating as opposed to teaching them. Okay, and so the third thing that I wanted to talk about is Bloom's taxonomy. Now, Bloom's taxonomy was developed in the late 50s, early 60s, and it is a series of cognitive skills and learning objectives that are arranged in a hierarchical order model from lower order thinking skills to more complex thinking skills. And it doesn't mean that the lower order thinking skills are, work bad or anything like that, and the higher ones, the more complex ones are good. It's not that kind of a hierarchy, but it's, the things that we are doing. So and Bloom's taxonomy has changed quite a bit over the years since I learned it, even back in the early 80s in educational psychology. And so, again, like I said, it's a hierarchical thing, so it's often represented in a pyramid. And it starts with the lower level thinking skills, which is like remembering. And remembering is just like recalling information. So if you learned your times tables as a second or third grader, you learned all the multiplication facts from 1 times 1 to 10 times 10, and we call that the times tables. And you can regurgitate that. You can remember that very easily. Or you learn to say the letters of the alphabet in order, singing a little song. Those are remembering skills. Those are just recall of information. And then we have understanding, which is not only recalling the information, but seeing how it is interrelated to each other. And so, for instance, when I learned the times tables for the 5s, it was easy to remember the times tables for the 10s because all I had to do was double it. Or if I learned the 3s and I went to the 9s, it was simpler. It was pretty simple to do that. And then I learned ways of how they were related to each other. The next level is applying it, how to take that information that you've learned and apply it to new situations. The 4th level is analyzing, which is, taking what we know and then doing some kind of like, well, does that work, or does this work, or why is it that way, and so forth. So analyzing our information. The 5th level is evaluating, which is, critiquing it. Did that work? Did that not work? And then the last level is creating, bringing something new into existence that wasn't there before. And so that's one simple way of it. And then they've also taken the cognitive processes, the cognitive domain out of the Bloom's taxonomy and created knowledge dimensions on that. And so we have this, now you can see on the page 11 of the handout, you have this grid of the knowledge dimension over here and the cognitive processes over here. So you have those 6 levels of Bloom's taxonomy over here on the right. And then over on the left, you've got metacognitive, procedural, conceptual, and factual. And so it's kind of a stair step instead of just a straight pyramid. And here, this is important because it helps us to really get to that highest level thinking skill possible on there. And so again, as we're looking at that, let me make it a little larger here so I can see it. We are going from being able to list things to all the way up to being able to create something new that never existed before. And so we move up on the scale in different areas there. Yeah, so anyway, this is about learning objectives, not necessarily learning activities, but what we're going to use to help us write the objectives that we want to get out of a class. So for instance, if I wanted to do a class on forgiveness, and I was using a certain process of forgiving, the first thing I might have them do on the lower level of Bloom's taxonomy was, list the steps involved in this process. And then I would have them move up into maybe clarifying that, which would be a little bit higher level. Like, what does that mean? What's the difference between this step and that step? And why would I use this one? And then as I move on up, I might have them actually use it to work through a problem. And then I could move on over to having them integrated into some other situation in their life. And then have them reflect upon how that worked. And then finally I'll have them take it and create a new process or new practice out of the information that I've given them on that particular topic. And so I've moved up in the levels of complexity throughout Bloom's taxonomy. Now this is, it's a lot of information, and the reason that I want to present it to you is because there are things in here that you can use to help you make your classes a little bit more effective. So, where'd it go? So on the, in your handout, the last page of your handout, last 2 pages of your handout, is questions that you can ask at each level of Bloom's taxonomy. So the first one is, the remember. So if you want to ask certain questions, is this true or this false? Or ask if which one of those things was true and which one was false. Or describe what happened when something occurred. Or name the person who was involved in that. Some of the activities that you could do is to unscramble the stories that you've given them. What happened first, second, third, sequence. Identify the most important characteristics of the particular individuals involved. You could have them create a picture of the situation or the thing that goes along with it, For understanding, have them take something and write it in their own words, or perhaps predict what they think might happen next. And again, you can have them explain what the main idea of something was, or retell the story in their own words, bring it up that way. For the application level, have you ever experienced something like that in your life? That's a great one to use in our classes, in our consciousness studies classes. Tell us about a time when you experienced this in your life. Or how would you use this if you were in this situation? What do you think you could do with this? For the analyze, what other possible outcomes might work in this situation is a really good one to ask. Or have them differentiate between fact and opinion in the text that they've read. We often get reading material that is one person's opinion, but it's presented as if it's totally the fact. And you can have them go through that and say, okay, which part of this is opinion, and which part of it do you think is actually factual? Comparing and contrasting things within a particular reading process is good. Like I did one experience where I had participants read a passage from one spiritual text and then read a similar passage or passage on the same topic from another spiritual text, and have them compare and contrast the two. What are they getting out of each one of those? And so that's a great one to do. Level 5, of course, is evaluate. What's the most important thing that you got out of this particular exercise? How would you have done it differently? Was it effective for you? Those kind of things. And then for the creating, this is where we get into the fun activities sometimes in our classes, where we have them do a final project where they're creating something new. I've gotten such wonderful, wonderful final projects from students on different topics. I know one time I had somebody give everybody a prescription, and it had a little pill bottle, and it had a prescription label on it, and their names, and it was, use it for this, and what the dosage was, suggested dosage, everything. It was really very creative. I've had people write songs. Some of the songs that have been written in our classes are actually been recorded and are out there. Poetry, lots of poetry. I had someone who did the hula, and they did an interpretive dance to something. All kinds of wonderful things that have been happening. Lots of collages and vision boards and things like that have been created from there. So lots of different ways of taking these ideas from Bloom's taxonomy and enriching your classes with them. If everything stays at the same level, if everything is just about understanding or everything is just about summarizing, the classes become kind of dull and boring. So, the purpose of Bloom's is to actually give you a chance to find things at the different levels and help you create different experiences for that in your classes. So this concludes our lecture. Like I said, on week 4, I will take you through some experiential activities and talk about some of these ideas that are in these lectures, because I normally do that as I'm doing the lecture. I'll stop for a few moments and do an experiential activity, because I believe it's important that we not inundate people with information in our online classes. And so again, this is a little different structure because of the necessity of recording these lectures. So don't forget to answer week 2 discussion forum. There are 3 videos on there, one on andragogy, one on constructivism, and one on Bloom's taxonomy. I think one of them might be 10 minutes, but the others are pretty short. And just, how would you apply that? What does it mean to you? What are you getting out of it? Any kind of thing that you want to bring up about that. And then don't forget to respond to 2 of your classmates. Awesome. Have a great week, everybody.